Hello and welcome to the Moms Making Dough podcast, episode 47. And today I'm going to be sharing my end of year review. This has been an absolute game changer for me, not only personally, but professionally as well. And it's something that I walk all my mompreneurs through at this time of year. So I'm in the process of, like I said, working, closing out clients for the end of the year. And this is like something that I get so excited to do with them. Um, and the process it has two steps. They are a little bit of length, but I am going to walk you through them just like I would do with one of my clients and just like I do for myself, so that you can start to utilize this process. And like I said, this is something I do at the end of every year, what I review what happened the previous one. And you will start to see that once this becomes a habit, it is game changer for you. This is not about shame. It's not about judgment or the things you should have done. This is prepping you for the new year and getting you into clarity, alignment, and designing a life that actually works for you from a financial perspective. And I also want to add the caveat also from a time perspective, because let's face it, time is money, especially when you are a working mom, whether you're an entrepreneur or just working the mom, or if you're a CEO of your home. There is so many hats we are always juggling. And this is a great process, regardless of where you are in your career, um, for you to do across multiple domains. But I'm going to focus today specifically on finances from both a personal and professional aspect. So I want to introduce the first two-part structure. I'm going to walk you through it. I'm going to give you some examples so that you, whether you are listening while you're walking your dog or driving the kids to school, that you can really start to process how you would set this up so you could do this exercise and give yourself this gift this holiday season of a couple hours undivided where you future pace the vision for not only your life, but what the finances that would need to be behind that to be able to create alignment and the clarity to move towards that vision. And it starts with part number one, which is what I call the review. And the review is going to be a process where you are getting your real, raw, true, unfiltered facts on paper. This is not your feelings. These are just your facts. So I like to share facts as thinking about how you were going to, let's say, present a case in court, and you would need evidence to support what you were going to present. And this is some of the questions I typically ask, not only myself, but like I said, when I'm working with a client, that I walk them through to get some of those facts. Total revenue, gross revenue, um, your top selling offers, what you spent this year. So your expenses, your overhead, what your profit margin currently is. So we're looking at like what are the current real numbers you're working with? Cash flow patterns. Did you have a really, really strong summer because you have a more of a seasonal business, and or do you have a business that really ends the year strong because maybe it's retail, maybe you're a big Black Friday and end of year sale person. Let's look at some of the cash flows. What were the months that like really were low, and can you pinpoint what the reasoning was behind it? Did you spend less money on marketing last course of the year? But if you are new to listening to Moms Making Dough, and this is the first time you're hearing this concept, I want you to really just think about the numbers that really could give you those facts to support that evidence. Like I said, in a presentation in a court case. Maybe it's you are looking at your time. Like, how many hours did you on average work in your business? Um, how many employees do you have? These are, like I said, facts. What is your current payroll? You can get really, really specific, but I find, especially when you are just starting to do this exercise, the best thing to do is to be a little bit more general in these numbers. So keeping it to 3 to 5 metrics that you're going to compare of where you factually are today to where you are going to go into the future. And, this is really, like I said, a huge thing for you want to be building we're starting to build the bridge of awareness to move towards alignment on what you want to vision cast for the future. So, when it comes to personal finance facts, here's a couple examples that I would typically look at. Income, what was the total brought into your house? And I typically, when I look at this number, I do it before taxes because that's a whole other category is taxes, right? Debt, what increased? What decreased? Did you take on debt? And you can be very specific here as well. What is the good debt you took on? Like, did you buy an asset attached to it? What is some of the bad debt? Did you go up in consumer debt? Did you have to outlay a lot of cash for a specific reason that you didn't plan for? Tell, give me some facts behind that. What's your savings account balance? Or what are some of the investments that you have? Where are they factually? Are they solid investments or are they ones that need some revision? And again, we're not getting into that to the next part, but we're just looking at like writing down the facts. What are your tax obligations, right? So if you brought in 100,000 and you look at your tax return from last year, what did you actually pay in taxes? Um, any major purchases or financial stressors this year? I don't do that, so I don't know which ones to tell you to use, but you can get these facts any way you want. The most important part is because this is the first step, you really want to get as many as you can get out onto some physical form. And, also, like, on personal finance facts, maybe another thing would be like, "Hey, what's a huge win you had?" Or maybe what was an unexpected, like I said, expense that you didn't plan for? And these are facts, like I said, from the current year. And then the second step in this first part of the review is now you're going to start to dive into your feelings about these facts, right? Because um, the difference between facts and feelings, I find as females, it is very, very easy for us to get caught up in the feeling, and kind of dismiss or minimize the facts. And it's finding a really, really delicate balance, but the feelings are much easier for most people to get in touch with. And downloading your feelings. So you're going to go through each fact you wrote down. And like I said, if you want to really be intense with this exercise, you can come up with as many and list as many facts as you want. And then also, what about the ones that brought you joy? And what about you is giving you excitement? And what is giving you peace? Some of those positive feelings. So, this part of the exercise, both the facts and the feelings, might have, like I said, some not so good feels and some great feels. And the goal is to get them out onto paper, out of your head, out of and into the world. And again, I'm sharing this in the context of financial. This could be in other categories of your life as well. But for the sake of this podcast episode, because we're focused on moms making dough, we're going to focus on the finances stuff. How do you actually feel about your year? What really frustrated you? What kept you up at night? And, where did you self-sabotage? Really, really huge pattern for myself again, and for many women that I work with is like, hey, you start seeing some success, some momentum, some growth, and you start to self-sabotage. Um, what are you really proud of? And what needs closure? Or maybe you need some forgiveness, such as like mistake you made with your money this year, or something, a habit that you know needs to be let go of if you want to move towards a bigger future when it comes to your finances. What is something that made you really happy? Like that you spent money on. For example, for me, is like I got back into riding and spending money on horses. And trust me, there was a lot of mixed feelings last year about committing to this because I know what horses cost. Remember, like when it comes to facts, facts are telling you what has happened this last year in your finances, in both your business and your personal life. Whereas feelings are some of the why behind them, the unconscious. And like I said, from a really good standpoint, and also sometimes from a not so good standpoint. So, like, for example, the success, like, hey, this was something that made me really happy. This is something I'm really proud of, versus this is something that like I self-sabotaged, or this is somewhere where I spent time, both time, money, and energy, but it didn't give me the payoff that I wanted. And here's how I feel about it. This is where I get that clarity and that connection between my current facts and how I feel about those facts. And this is what like I said at the beginning, this is the bridge from between awareness. The first part of the review is me building awareness so that I can start to do the really fun part, which is vision cast on where I want to go in 2026. And again, this is a process where we have to do this part of the process first, the review, before we can get to the results and set our results, our vision casting for the future for the next year. And also, this is like a really good opportunity with the feelings to start to ask yourself, what are some of the ways that I grew this year? And I want you to start to recognize too, just like, how did you feel about that growth? Because typically what I find, growth is the people that grow exponentially are usually people that are willing to put up with some sort of discomfort or change that is temporary for them to move into a growth phase and get uncomfortable or try something different or change their approach. And that brings us to, how do we set our results? And we need to do that step first before we can set those results. And then we're going to start to future pace. This is where you start to create the vision for the next year in either your business, your personal, or both when it comes to your finances. And I'm going to give you an example. And the core foundation of this exercise, why we do the review first, is because we want to first state our real results. And we want a baseline for these outcomes to set the next part of the result. And the baseline of these outcomes that make us feel grounded and doable, and what I call reconvening on your real facts. So I'm going to use an example as I walk you through this process. I'm going to walk you through the whole process first on this second part, and then I'm going to give you the examples, because then it will make a lot more sense. So there is 3 categories we are going to set our vision for next year, but we have that baseline, the real. And the first category we're going to set is based on reviewing our real facts and feelings of where we currently are at. Where are we on the map today? We want to start to look at what's the vision we want to craft going forward. These reasonable results are slightly more of a stretch. They require strategy, discipline, and some some movement of alignment. Meaning they are ones that like you really, really want to, you think you can hit based on what you did this year. And I'm going to give you an example from a personal standpoint first, and then we'll walk back through it with the business just to drive it home. I'm going to take income as an example because the income is by far it's an easy way for me to illustrate this. And again, you can set whatever reasonable targets you want, whatever you are working on chasing. The goal is that to feel like this makes sense and you are working towards a vision where you have a plan behind it, but you're also being called forward to pursue it. So let's take that reasonable result first. Let's say you in 2025, and I'm going to pick easy numbers just so you guys can see how I would work up this, what I call ladder of results. And so let's say last year you took home, we're going to do personal first, $50,000. And of that $50,000, the next step would be to set your reasonable target, which is, you already made 50. So that's your real result. Your reasonable result would be, could you increase that by $25,000. So let's say you would go from 50 to 75. Now, here is a huge, huge distinction you need to make when doing this exercise. This goal, like I said, is slightly more of a stretch. You cannot get bogged down in the how this is going to happen at this stage. If you start getting bogged down in now in the how, you will not make it through this exercise in a timely fashion, but you will also get caught up and never make it to the ridiculous results that you want to, which are much bigger stretch and I dream that you have zero idea on how to reach based on your current state and your current state of like how you are operating as a human and as a business owner and as a mom. The second category of targets you're going to set is what we call our radical. These are slightly more of a stretch. They are the kind of goals that like make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but not impossible. The radical is what I call the sweet spot. These are the ones that require a shift in who you are becoming and not just what you do on a daily basis. They are reasonable ones are much more habit based, meaning you have to change some behaviors and some habits. Radical requires usually a shift in not only your habits but also in your mindset. And they are ones that, like I said, they are going to shift who you are becoming so that by this time next year, if you hit these radical targets, you would even recognize the version of you that was here the previous year. And they, like I said, they're going to shift how you think, how you feel, and also what you do on a daily basis. And on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, when it comes to both personal and professional goals. So if we already set our real baseline at 50,000 and our reasonable target, which was slightly a stretch and had to change some of my habits, it would be 75,000. Now, if that 75,000 is now going to become my radical one, so I actually have 3 columns: reasonable, radical, and then ridiculousness, which we haven't got to, or ridiculous, I should say. I always say ridiculousness because I love that show and it always comes out. It's just like, it's almost like a branding thing. Um, this is going to be, let's say, a stretch. If I made 50,000 this year, one that makes me uncomfortable is writing down, hey, I would make 100,000. So I would double my income. That would be radical, right? And then we get to the ridiculous. And the ridiculous is that one that really takes some practice because we are not encouraged to dream like this in our everyday lives. Especially as the older we get, it gets harder and harder to imagine and create out of it. Expands your capacity and it activates your faith. But are not going to figure out how you're going to be able to get this at this stage of the game in the exercise. These are God-sized goals. They unlock both manifestation and they unlock momentum. Meaning, God put it on your heart, but you have no freaking clue how the version of you that sits here today would actually be able to do this. And I'm going to take us back to that exercise with the reasonable, radical, ridiculous, and show you the ladder, right? So our real result is we brought in personally $50,000. Our reasonable stretch goal is to bring it to 75,000 in 2026. Our radical is that we make 100,000. So we doubled the income in 2026 that we made to today, from this last year, the 2025 $50,000 goal. And ridiculous would be to make $150,000. And so we're talking about take home pay because we're talking about personal finances. I'm going to walk you back through it with a business example as well. But that's how critical this is that you see the ladder of what it is, because as of today, the version of me today that brought in $50,000 has no freaking idea what I would do differently tomorrow to start to make it to 150. But I start to put it out there into the universe that it is something that I actually would entertain, that God has put on my heart and I want to pursue. I just don't know how to. And what I want you to do when it comes to your personal finances, you're going to set these targets. And again, you can set them in multiple categories, but I'm going to use a personal, just setting them on income targets for you to learn how to do this exercise. And I want you to just choose one ridiculous result that based on what you made this last year and start to work that personal financial ladder of what that would look like. And now, most of my clients and myself included, then I start to work backwards, is that I start to reverse engineer that. And then this is how what we do is we start to reverse engineer that. How do you break down those that big vision and turn it into quarterly targets? And I always tell people you start with breaking down quarterly targets based on your reasonable results. Because once you start breaking them down on reasonable results, you get in the habit and you start to figure out how, over the course of time, how you could start to reach that radical. And sometimes you might even shock yourself and reach a ridiculous goal in the process. So, this is how I choose my monthly focus themes for myself personally, but also for my clients. So, this is my end of year review, and it's the way that I turn big dreams into bite sized, trackable actions. And I want to close on this is that, like, give yourself a minimum of a 2-hour block of time to walk through this and give it the time it needs. I get much more specific and I have multiple businesses, so it does take me a little bit longer. But I want you to just start the habit of doing a monthly review. And if all you have to give yourself this gift of this holiday season is a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or your lemon water at a cafe all by yourself for an hour, take that hour and just walk through this part one review where you get your facts and your feelings about them. And then you start setting your results in your personal income, or if you own a business, your revenue targets, and just really start small. And then I want you to just remember that consistency will always trump intensity. So, you starting this exercise will be huge, especially if you start this year so that you have something to look at next year and you get to really track and see how far you have come, how you have shifted in both your behaviors, your habits, and ultimately your identity as not only a business owner but with your personal finances. And it might just be a end of year review that you are actually excited to do by next year. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, thank you for listening to Moms Making Dough. Please share this with anybody you might find that might find this information useful. And as always, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time on Moms Making Dough.